some bourbon mule chicken. So what we did was we wanted to play off the flavors of bourbon chicken and a mule. So we used lime juice and ginger and used bourbon as the alcohol in that drink instead of the traditional alcohol, which would typically be vodka. So in order to speed up this process, what I've done is, instead of filming and showing you each ingredient, this is our marinade right here. So I'm gonna post it down below and in the video, and you'll be able to pause or take it down. This is gonna go on our chicken. Ideally, you should marinate overnight. So I have 5 cleaned up chicken breasts right here. No fat, no cartilage, none of that's on there. They're not split, they're not butterflied, because we're going on the smoker and I don't want them to dry out. Ideally, yeah, you could, cook them where they were butterflied and they wouldn't dry out, but I want them to stay on there and get some more smoke flavor to play off with our bourbon. So that's the idea there. So we're gonna marinate these, put it all in there. And I mean, ideally overnight, about 4 to 6 hours is gonna be at a minimum. You can go less, it's just not gonna taste as strong. Marinate's not gonna have as much time. So no big deal. It is a strong marinade, so it will work within 4 to 6 hours. I'm gonna mix all this up. Now, in this case, we're gonna season again after we take them out. Normally I season before and after. In this case, this marinade is so strong and acidic that I didn't season with any kind of salt or anything like that yet. That's gonna be after we take them out. So you can see, marinade's absorbing very quickly. And if you leave this too long, it's gonna cook because of the acid from the lime and from the bourbon. So don't leave it too long. It's meant to be pretty strong and work fairly quickly. So now that our chicken is marinating, I'm gonna make the bourbon sauce. Of course, what do we need for bourbon sauce? First ingredient, Maker's Mark, right here. You can use any kind of bourbon you like. It doesn't need to be anything special. It just happened to be what I picked up in Sam's Club bulk. So it's fantastic for this. In this pot here, I have 12 ounces of the Maker's Mark. Now you notice I'm using a little bit of a higher pot to the amount of liquid in here. And that's because we are going to light this on fire and reduce this by quite a bit. So that's gonna be a very important thing. You're not gonna wanna have a small pot because you're gonna have a huge flame. Be very careful when you're doing this, of course. I have an electric stove, so it's not as easy for me to do it, just light it like most people do. So I prefer to do it with a torch and start from there. So I'm gonna light this up. You'll notice if the alcohol is cold, it's not going to flame up like normal. You're gonna have to put this on there for a second. Okay, so now flaming, you can see it slightly, to the camera, but now we're on fire. So what we want to do is, once this dies down, the natural part of it dies down, where most of the visceral gases from the alcohol are cooked off. Once that's happened, you want to put that on the stove on low. Bourbon's a pretty high proof, so it shouldn't really be an issue keeping this flame going. Main thing is, be careful. If you have to put this in the sink, that's fine. You don't necessarily have to do it how I'm doing it now. I'm just doing that for video purposes. If I were to be as safe as possible, light it in the sink that's dry and just let it burn out. Then put it on the stove and reduce it down. Okay, just my recommendation for those novice cooks out there and people that are going to try to do this if they see the video. Once this is done burning off, I have here our almost like the base of the sauce. It's going to add a lot of complexity to the sauce. So the caramelized bourbon that reduces, and the ingredients in here, the black pepper, the ginger, the onion powder, the Worcestershire sauce, Worcestershire, however you want to say it, and all that is going to meld with that intense alcohol flavor. It's going to kind of round it out, as well as the brown sugar is going to round it out. Okay, so now our bourbon has stopped flaming, and we have lost about, I'd say about half of what we put in there. And this is where we want to stop, and we're going to add our other ingredients right here. And we are going to place this on the stove. We're going to want to bring this to a boil and then simmer this, reduce this by about, I would say, 1/3 to 1/2, or until it gets syrupy. So, onto the stove. Okay, so obviously we needed some vegetables to go along with our chicken today, and we've been trying to stay away from starch at night, so this is going to be a pretty good one, I think. So we have in here salt, pepper, and our garlic confit, the fried garlic from the other day. We have 2 dried chilies, chili de árbol, fresh oregano, and 1 Anaheim peppers, about 2 ounces, diced up. So we're going to take this, put it in here, and then take the immersion blender and blend it all up. So as we do this, I just want to say you're going to want to chop your ingredients beforehand a little bit, just because most immersion blenders don't blend up as well if it's a big chunk. I'm gonna blend. All blended up, nice and smooth. There's little pieces in there, but ideally this is the theory here. So with a marinade or paste like this that we've just made that we're going to put on our vegetables, I've done a rustic cut on our veggies, zucchini, onions. We're going to do some portobello mushrooms as well. The idea is that this paste coats them, and being that it's broken down so much, the flavor will absorb into the vegetables quickly, intensify, but then when it dries out from the dry heat from the grill, all those little bits of pepper and oregano and garlic are going to caramelize and create a really good flavor. So ideally, we want to get some of these on our veggies. I want to start with the zucchini first. You don't need to go too heavy on this because it is pretty strong. You want to toss those around. So it's nice and coated, just like that. So same thing with the onions. Spoon or so. Again, we're gonna brush with this mixture as we grill these. Main thing is to get these coated up nicely with all those little bits that we've ground up with the immersion blender. See, just like that. Put them on a sheet tray. And the reason why I do the mushrooms last is because mushrooms tend to make a little bit of a mess, especially portobello mushrooms. Now on these, you can remove the gills and the stem. I'm not going to do that because we're going to grill them and we're going to lose a lot of moisture throughout the grilling process. So we're not going to really remove much. Maybe just like a little bit of this I might remove. But you don't need to really do much to these if you're going to grill them. You really want to keep things in their natural state. In a fine dining restaurant, yeah, you would scoop the gills out and everything like that. We don't need to do that here. The mushrooms will absorb a good amount of oil, so you're going to want to put a little bit more on this one. They tend to like to absorb moisture. It's just the nature of the beast with these. So again, mix it around. You notice I'm not using my hands to mix them, and that's because I really don't want to break the mushrooms up too much. You'll see like right there it started to break a little bit. So gently just kind of moving them around. They're getting all coated nicely. I'm gonna get these onto our sheet tray. Now I'm just using the sheet tray as a transport vessel, as you will, to get to the grill. We are gonna season these again with salt and pepper, just to kind of reiterate all these flavors going on here. Okay, we're gonna season them a little bit more, just to kind of reiterate Okay, so our bourbon sauce has been reducing. Just want to show this spoon here. What you want to see is a streak running through it. Actually, very good. You want to see a streak running through it and not close back together while it's warm. That means that our sauce has reduced significantly and enough to thicken naturally. And now what we're going to want to do is we have really, really intense flavor here, which I might add is really, really good, but slightly too intense. So what we need to do is we need to add a little bit of liquid, and we're going to naturally thicken it with a little bit of cornstarch. You can use any other thickener you want, and round it out with a little bit of butter. So that's going to round out all of our flavors and make it very, very enjoyable to have lots of the sauce, not just little dips and dots of sauce. We also are going to glaze with this, so it's going to be really, really nice. It's a winner. This is a winner. Okay, so what I've done is refine the sauce a little bit more. I've refined it, replaced the pot. We definitely didn't want to do what we did in the first part with a non-stick pot. This happens to be non-stick. It's the smallest pot I have. I didn't make a lot of sauce, just enough for what we needed. Right here we have our cornstarch slurry. This is 3/4 of a cup or 6 ounces of water and 1 tablespoon of cornstarch. So we mix this up cold water. Always want to use cold water. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to warm this liquid back up that I strained the sauce and add the slurry in. Bring it up to a boil, let it thicken, and then reduce it if need be. Okay, so I've got my sauce where I want it now. It's reduced enough to do the same thing I did before, but it is more rounded out because we added a little bit of water to it. So now, I want you to check out what it's still going a little bit. Very, very low. When you see bubbles like that, and when you see it starting to rise up like that, one, be careful. You don't want it to be too hot because it will overflow. And two, that would mean that you are pretty close to where you need it to be. Because remember, this is going to cool down, so it's going to thicken further. So now what I want to do is I want to add 2 nice chunks of butter. And at this point, what you really want to be doing is stirring, stirring, stirring. A lot, or whisk, whatever you want, whatever you choose to use. And mainly, that's because here, see, as the butter is melting as we whisk this, and it's emulsifying with the sauce. So if we don't do it like this, and technically I should be using 2 hands to do this, moving the pot back and forth and mixing this. But for the sake of filming, we're doing it this way. So you can see the sauce gets shinier, butter melts fairly quickly, and at this point, now that we've mounted this with the butter, it's done. There's nothing else we need to do with this. Just make sure that these 2 pats of butter mix in quite well. And do not heat this too much after this point, because you will separate the emulsion, and that's not what you want. You want this to be a nice, beautiful sauce. So now we have our beautiful glaze here. Again, I'm going to check with the spoon. You want it to drip like that because, again, it's going to cool down. You're going to want to use this when it's room temperature, because ideally you want a nice thick glaze, and that will happen once it cools down. So what you're going to want to do now is you're going to want to take some of the sauce and put it in a separate little container with a brush, so we can glaze the chicken later, and then save the remaining of that for dipping the chicken in it. Okay, so we put our vegetables onto the grill at about 300 degrees, and they've been on there for about an hour. So we're going to brush them with our mixture we made before with the Anaheim pepper and garlic and chili and oregano. So they've been on there for about an hour. Got all that. Now look at all those bits of the marinade. It's definitely caramelized up on there. Okay, so we got them all brushed up very nicely again. We're going to move our onions to the top rack, and then we're going to put our chicken on the bottom rack right here. Okay, so now that we've got our chicken on here, presentation side down, crank the grill up to about 400, and should take about 30 minutes total, depending on the size of your chicken breast. I'm going to go lower heat with chicken. You don't want to go too high because it will dry it out, and that's not what we're aiming to do here. So, see you in a second. Okay, so it's been about 10 minutes, maybe a little more than 10 minutes, and here's our chicken. So you can see we had the lid closed, white on the top too, but it's not done yet. Right now we're going to flip this chicken, and then we're going to glaze the chicken. Got our chicken all nice and glazed up. I'm going to keep glazing this every 5 minutes now. I'm going to keep using the glaze, keep glazing it over. It's going to take about another 15 minutes to cook this chicken and be done. But we have moved the chicken to the top rack. It's all nice and glazed up now. The glaze has been building layers as we've been sitting it on the top. And should be in about another 5 minutes. I'm going to glaze it one more time. I'm going to take it off and let it rest.